Greetings and salutations, my friends, and welcome to a new video. Today, clearly, we are attempting something very different. We are sitting in front of the bookshelves. We rarely sit in front of the shelves. We have got some mellow, kind of soft, cozy lighting that I am hoping you guys will vibe with. We have got a warm cup of tea with one of my favorite mugs. I've talked about this mug recently. It's my Bad Day Pivot mug. And so the hope today is to talk about some of the best audiobooks I have ever listened to. As you guys may or may not know, I've talked about this before. I am not the biggest audiobook listener. In fact, as I was compiling this list and I was looking at all of the books that I have listened to in the past 4 years, because I really only started listening to audiobooks in 2021, I have realized that audiobooks really comprise around 10% of what I have read in the past 4 years. And not going to lie, it was kind of surprising because I thought it would be more books, but I think the ones I've compiled for you guys in this list, we are going to talk about over 15 audiobooks to listen to, some of the best I have listened to. I think that the ones I have chosen for today are absolutely phenomenal. As a person with loads of anxiety and loads of ADHD, I sometimes really struggle to focus when it comes to audiobooks, and so you can trust that every single audiobook rec on this list are audiobooks that, while all of them may not be a full cast of characters or may not be a full production, it may not be a dramatized version, all of them are so engaging. The narrators are constantly putting on different inflections, different voices, bringing the story to life in a way that feels tangible, that feels exciting, that feels engaging. And so, not going to lie, I'm going to pull my own plug here and say, pull my own plug here. That doesn't sound like a nice pun, but I am going to throw myself some flowers and say, these are probably some of the best audiobooks you will ever listen to if you have not listened to them yet. So without further ado, let's get into some of the best audiobooks I have ever listened to that I think you should listen to as well. Just so you guys know, I am going to put up pictures for all of these books, even though I own most of these, for time efficiency, because I am going to talk about quite a bit of books, and we've got books from all different categories and genres. So in this list, I compiled some thriller, some horror, sci-fi, fantasy, romance, contemporary, literary fiction. We have got some non-fiction. We have got some classics. And so the list is quite complete, if I do say so myself. And the very first thing we are going to explore today are thrillers and horrors. And I want to start out with Into the Drowning Deep by Mira Grant. This is probably, hands down, one of the best audiobooks I have listened to in this category. Now, I have never been afraid of the sea. I have never been afraid of sea voyages and the prospect of getting into any sort of sea vessel. But this book right here did make me deadly afraid to do so. And in this one, we follow a sea quest gone wrong. The Attergatis, a sea vessel, was sent out to the Mariana Trench with a crew to make a mockumentary of all of the ancient sea creatures that may dwell there. The Mariana Trench, if you don't know, is the deepest point of the ocean. And so this crew was sent on this mission to make this mockumentary, and everybody and the vessel itself goes completely missing. So now, years in the future, our main character, Victoria Stewart, embarks on a journey herself with a few others as a crew to investigate what happened to the crew of the Attergatis. And the reason why Victoria Stewart is so invested in this, because her own sister went missing. I absolutely loved this book. There was this entire scene about some sort of creature, I won't say what, literally crawling up the side of the ship. It was absolutely terrifying to listen to on audio. I think the narrator does a wonderful job at making this seem as creepy and unsettling as it was. Could you just imagine being over at the Mariana Trench investigating a tragedy such as this, your own sister going missing with creatures that you may not be aware of? And so it was absolutely terrifying, and the audiobook made it much more so. Next up, we have got Sadie by Courtney Summers, another one of the best audiobooks I have ever listened to. Got a podcast element to it, which I think makes it super interesting, super different, because it's got sound effects and just dramatized bits that make it feel all the more real and like you're actually following along in the investigation of Sadie's story. And so in this one, we follow Sadie in her journey of raising her little sister Maddie. And one day, as all good thrillers go, Maddie is found dead, and Sadie will stop at nothing to figure out exactly what happened to her sister. And as she goes deeper and deeper into this investigation, following all clues and tracks that she can potentially find, she draws the attention of a local podcaster who will then follow in Sadie's footsteps to find her and figure out what happened to Maddie too. It is the most heartbreaking book, but honestly the most engaging audio experience because of all of those external elements outside of the story that make it feel on a sensory level so real. This is one that you won't be able to stop thinking about. This is one that will get you hooked from beginning to end. I think the line, "And Sadie, if you are out there, please let me know. I can't take another dead girl," still haunts me to this day. Next up is probably one of my favorite books of all time, and the audiobook really made this experience experience for me, and that is the Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires by Grady Hendrix. Grady Hendrix had been a really on and off author for me as far as how much I had liked his books up till that point, and then I listened to Southern Book Club's Guide and I became thoroughly obsessed with the storytelling in this book. Set in the 90s, which you already know will make the vibes be absolutely elite, and we observe our main character Patricia very, very closely as her day-to-day life goes by, and she really simmers on the thought that she kind of regrets a little bit how her life went about. She gave up her career to be a mother, to be a wife, to be a stay-at-home mother, and she doesn't feel like her life day-to-day is very exciting. She feels like it's very routine-like. She has got responsibilities that seem never ending. Her husband is very dismissive. It's very nonchalant. She feels like she is carrying this household by herself, and so really the only thing that seems to keep her afloat these days is the book club she's a part of with a few of her neighbors. All of them convene to read their thriller, horror, and true crime stories. They definitely think that if anything were to happen in their town, they would definitely be the ones to solve this crime, and it seems like the universe is here to grant their every desire, because as a new, handsome, sultry stranger moves to their town, Patricia finds herself very attracted to him. She's like, damn, this guy's kind of cute. And then things turn a little bit weird when he starts turning up in the most strangest of places, in the most strangest of moments, and after kids start to go missing, Patricia thinks that he may just have something to do with it, although she may not even begin to imagine exactly what is happening behind the scenes with this particular character, and things kind of go from there. This book is every bit as campy and yet serious as you'd expect it to be. Horror, as always, is a vessel for a lot of good commentary, and Grady Hendrix doesn't disappoint. I think for a primarily female cast in this book written by a man, because I think that's a huge topic of discussion about authors being able to accurately represent women or not represent women that well in their books. I think Grady Hendrix does a fantastic job at navigating that slice of life from a stay-at-home mom for a housewife in the 90s. I quite liked this, and the audiobook, again, really made the experience for me, so I highly recommend. And for our last thriller today, we have got The Last House on Needless Street by Catriona Ward. This book took me by surprise. I didn't think I was going to like this book, one. Two, didn't think I was going to enjoy the audio. However, the audio made it such a fantastic experience where you never really knew what was happening, and the book was so twisty, so turny. It's got great depictions and explorations on mental health and trauma and mental illness, which was actually very surprising too. I was not expecting that to be a part of the book, and it definitely kept you on the edge of your seat the entire time. It starts out kind of passive. You think it's very boring, don't really understand quite what's going on, but the sooner you get to the end of the book and everything starts unraveling, you start to realize that there's a lot more than meets the eye. And so I would definitely recommend, for a very mind-boggling book, to pick this one up. So in this one, we have got a house at the end of a street that is seemingly a normal house. Inside it reside a man named Ted, his daughter named Lauren, and his cat named Olivia. And throughout the book, we hear from all of their different perspectives, and it becomes very clear quite quickly that not everything is as great on the inside of the house as it seems on the outside. And to top everything off, there is a serial killer out on the loose, and we follow Dee, the sister of one of the girls that has been killed, and Dee is extremely suspicious of Ted because she thinks that he's the one that killed her sister, and things just kind of go from there. It's one of those books that it's best to go into it knowing absolutely nothing, because there is absolutely nothing I could say, especially without spoiling it, that will really prepare you for this journey. So pick up the audio, listen to it, and once you do report back. I'd love to hear some thoughts. Welcome to our fantasy sci-fi section. Now, this cannot be an audiobook recommendations video. Recommendations is my favorite word, and you're starting to listen to it real close with this microphone. I couldn't make this video without shouting out the Witcher series. The Witcher audiobooks are some of the best audiobooks I have ever listened to. And when I talk about some of the best, I don't even mean the story. Like, yes, the story's fantastic. I mean the narrator's dedication to this book. This man is out here putting on voices, changing inflections per character. He is singing, but not even in tune, and he's just embracing the journey in such a charismatic way that you cannot help but kind of like fall in love a little bit with the narrator. Like, it's actually an awesome journey, and I think specifically, at least for the first two set of novellas, which are the only ones I've listened to, I think because we are traveling from town to town. We are seeing different cultures, different people, different accents, different mythical creatures. The audiobook, for it to seem realistic and for it to seem like a tangible thing, you need to commit to the journey of really making sure that each character, each creature, each town feels and sounds different, and the narrator makes sure to do that. So in the Witcher series, we follow Geralt of Rivia, a Witcher. Witchers are basically genetically enhanced individuals that were grabbed from a really, really young age to mutate and become supernatural creatures of a kind, to become monster hunters. And the cool thing about Geralt of Rivia is that as you follow him in his travels, he is a character that has got a really strong moral compass. He knows what he is capable of doing and willing to do and what he is not willing to do, and he doesn't budge regardless of how much money is offered, regardless of what glory is offered afterwards. He knows who he is and what he stands for, and he will stand by his word every single time. And so in the first two books, The Last Wish and Sword of Destiny, those are the short novellas that you are supposed to read before you read the main series, so that you can get further illustration into the world, get some really good world building, get all of that explanation into who Geralt is, where he comes from, see all of these different towns and creatures and quests that take him to the main plot line of Ciri. And it's all a part of a bigger prophecy to become true. And so I would highly recommend the audiobooks. I think that the series can be quite intimidating because there are quite a bit of books, and also the world building may seem a bit dense, but I think the audiobook makes it such a pleasant and such a quick experience too. Like, the audiobooks are really, really short. And so I would highly, highly recommend them, because I don't think I have ever listened to better fantasy audiobooks personally. And I know what y'all are gonna say. Mel, have you listened to Lord of the Rings? I have not yet, but I do have them on queue because Andy Serkis narrates them, and I want to experience that with my own two ears. I was gonna say two eyes, but that is the wrong body part entirely. Would this be an audiobook recommendations video without the cliched rec of Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir? I feel like every single audiobook rec video that I have seen includes Project Hail Mary, and that is not without reason. It is one of the best audiobooks I have listened to. Honestly, the narrator does a fantastic job, particularly at the comedy. I didn't expect Andy Weir to be such a witty and comedic author, and yet it sneaks itself into the story so perfectly well. And when I was listening to the audiobook, I couldn't help but laugh and chuckle at a lot of the things that the main character was experiencing. You guys know I love me some good mental lagoons when it comes to my stories, particularly in sci-fi or thrillers. I love reading about characters that have got no fucking idea what is going on, and slowly but surely as the story goes on, they need to kind of piece everything together. And that is exactly what Project Hail Mary is. We follow our main character as he wakes up in a tiny ship in space, millions and millions of miles away from home, and he's got two corpses for company. Not kidding, the entire crew is dead. He is the sole survivor, and he has got no idea what his name is, no idea what he's doing in space, no idea what the scientific voyage is even about, and he needs to piece everything together, because the one thing he is kind of aware of is that humanity's entire livelihood and safety depends on him figuring everything out and carrying out his mission. And so we follow him as he literally wakes up and it starts to freak out about, where the fuck am I and who am I and what is happening and why am I here? And immediately the comedy is top tier in this one. Immediately we feel for our main character and everything that he is going through. And I think the more you dive into the story and you find out about his past and about why he is so invested in this particular mission, why he decided to go in the first place, and what the mission even is about, I think you feel more and more for our main character and the safety of planet Earth as a whole. It was such a cool journey to go on. This is the only Andy Weir book I have ever read, but if the audiobook for this one is any indication, maybe I should also get the audiobook for The Martian. I don't know. I do own The Martian physically as well, but Project Hail Mary is a fan favorite for a reason, because it's so fucking good. Let me tell you something. Clara and the Sun is another really good audiobook. It's so good. I binge read this in literally a day through the audio. I couldn't stop listening to it. It was so easy to hyperfixate in the story, not only because Kazuo Ishiguro makes it such a compelling, humane experience, but it's also such a compelling story because the entire thing really explores artificial intelligence and how far people can go with it and how far it can actually go in general. So we follow our main character, Clara, who is an artificial friend. So in this world, people are able to quite literally walk into a store. Imagine walking into a Best Buy or the equivalent in your country and being able to get an electronic friend for it to take care of your pet, for it to take care of your household stuff, for it to play with your child. And Clara stands in that window every single day, fascinated with the sun. First of all, she's like fascinated by the concept of like this powering energetically, and also wishing and hoping that one day she'll get bought. And then one day she is, and we follow her in this journey as she finds out exactly what this family wants with her, and as she befriends the child of the home, Josie. And it is such a beautiful and yet conflicting experience. Like, there was definitely a point in the book, especially with like the plot twist and when we find out exactly what's happening, and I was like, oh, I kind of hate this. And like, I can't believe this is even where we are at out of desperation. But more than anything, I think it was a beautiful look into the world through Clara's eyes. Clara, as somebody who is obviously of artificial origin, and as somebody who in many ways behaves like a child because she doesn't fully understand what's happening around her, she is fascinated by the tiniest of things, the tiniest of details. She is obviously fascinated to learn about human emotion and human connection and what drives people on an everyday basis, and how as humans, as a society, we kind of machinate it all. And to see a character that doesn't quite grasp fully what all of these things are, what these concepts are, and following in her journey of understanding was so refreshing and so different to anything I'd read before. The Greenbone Saga by Fonda Lee. And I say the Greenbone Saga because this is not just, oh my god, read Jade City, listen to Jade City. Listen to all of them. Please make yourselves a favor. If you like family sagas, if you like stories akin to The Godfather, if you like Asian dramas, if you like martial arts, all of that combines itself into the Greenbone Saga. In the Greenbone Saga, we are set in the land of Kekon, which produces this rare magical jade that under the right circumstances, training, and heritage allows people superhuman abilities. And we particularly follow the two biggest crime syndicates that run Kekon, but particularly we follow the Cowl clan very, very closely. And as the new generation of Cowls is taking over the clan, the old generation is very concerned about how they're going to run everything. Things have been quickly changing in Kekon. We are approaching an age that they've never seen before, with technology and new weapons that they are very much strangers to. And as tensions escalate between these two clans, as they are switching over their power, and you start to observe all of the different intricate politics that go into this world, you start to realize that securing the safety of Kekon is not the easiest thing ever. It is the most enthralling series I think I have ever read. It's definitely up there. The characters are so flawed and yet so compelling. The books are very heavy in their world building, which may make them seem very dense and oftentimes dull, but I promise you it is not either of those things. I think if you listen to the audiobooks, it makes it a much more easy to carry experience, because I find that with denser books that contain loads of world building, it builds their political system quite intricately. I find that audiobooks make it much more accessible to digest that information, and the Greenbone Saga is no different. I listened to the audiobooks for books 2 and 3. I flew through them. I literally listened to them both basically in a day because I could not put down the audiobook because it made it such an easier experience to consume. And so if you've been struggling with the Greenbone Saga, or if you've been thinking of going into it, I would highly suggest the audiobook. And my very next one is Strange the Dreamer by Laini Taylor. It could not be a section of fantasy audiobook recommendations without me bringing up this book. Strange the Dreamer is such a whimsy purple prose book in all of the right ways. Laini Taylor knows where to put it in and how to kind of withdraw from so much whimsy so as to not overwhelm the reader. The narrator, Steve West, does a beautiful, beautiful job. I don't think I've ever listened to another Steve West audiobook outside of Strange the Dreamer, but just know he is absolutely fantastic. So in Strange the Dreamer, we have got our main character, Laszlo Strange, who is a junior librarian. However, outside of his regular job, something particular, very much so, plagues him, particularly in his dreams. He keeps dreaming of this lost city of Weep that has no records anywhere, and particularly of this blue-skinned goddess that resides within Weep. And Laszlo believes that this is a mystery that needs to be solved, something that needs to garner more attention, and something that needs more information. However, he thinks that this is not a task for him. Somebody else needs to go to the lost city of Weep that is now basically barreled off from the rest of the world, then he gets an opportunity from the God Slayer himself to go to that very city, and Laszlo believes that he cannot turn this down because he needs to find out exactly what happened, because nobody else ever will. I will say no more and no less about Strange the Dreamer, except pick it up. One of those rare instances where the second book is even better than the first one, and the first one was already a 5-star. Last but not least, for our fantasy category, we have got Daughter of the Moon Goddess by Su Lin Tan. Absolutely adored this book. You guys know anything to do with folklore mythology, I am all in for. This was no different. It's full of Chinese folklore and mythology. It very much reads like a Chinese drama. Its stakes are quite high, the tension is quite high, and the main character is in danger mostly all of the time. And even when you think she's out of it, she's not. So she really doesn't get a single moment of peace, and I can't wait to read the second one, which I've owned for a while and I've yet to listen to, because yes, I will also be listening to the audiobook for book 2. So it being a story that has loads of folklore and mythology, we particularly observe the goddess Shang-E, and in the story in particular, we follow the events after she has stolen a magical elixir from the Celestial Emperor, and in turn, she was exiled because of it. And after she was exiled, she also had to hide her daughter, Xingyan, which the Celestial Emperor doesn't know exists. And her mother's orders have always been, don't use your powers, don't call attention to yourself, stay in the moon. She grew up in the moon. However, one day Xingyan's powers are triggered and the Celestial Emperor takes notice of it. He gets to the moon, he interrogates Shang-E, and he's like, hey baby, what's happening? I thought you had no powers and no daughters or sons or anything for that matter. So what exactly is going on? And because of it, Xingyan is forced to flee from her home and adopt an entirely new persona to make sure that she stays safe. And where does she fall? Exactly beside the Emperor's son. So she will train with him and garner all of her abilities with him whilst hiding her real identity. And she does so to keep herself alive, and things kind of go from there. And the romance was equal parts heartbreaking and compelling in this one too, because our girl Xingyan definitely breaks a few hearts in this one. So I absolutely adored Daughter of the Moon Goddess, would definitely recommend. Welcome to our romance, contemporary, and literary fiction category. I had to kind of mix all of these in one because I could not do individual ones even if I tried. And so this one's going to be a little bit interesting because we're going to start out with anything Elizabeth Acevedo. Honestly, I don't have a specific book in mind that I want to say like, go ahead and read this one, but really anything by this author. She narrates all of her audiobooks and she is a slam poet, and you can tell because the way that she brings her stories to life is so compelling and heartfelt and honest and human and so beautiful that you can't help but be captivated throughout every single one of her stories. There's family lore, which is an adult magical realism following a multi-generational story about a family that gathers as one of their own who has the power to see people's death, basically calls for her own living wake, and they're not sure if she's doing so because she is about to die or if she's doing so just for the shits and giggles. But it's a beautiful, beautiful look into sisterhood, motherhood, into female friendships and relationships and families. It's such an intimate look at everyday life that I quite enjoyed. You have got things like The Poet X, in which we follow Xiomara, our main character, who feels like she can't really express herself quite well in her everyday life, particularly her mother being extremely religious kind of prevents her from expressing herself the way that she wants to, and she finds that slam poetry is one of the few ways for her to do so. Gets an opportunity to participate in a competition, and the book goes from there. Then we have got Clap When You Land, which quite literally makes me want to sob my eyes out just thinking about it. We follow two sisters, one who lives in the Dominican Republic, another one that lives in New York, and both of them are aware that their father was traveling, and when it is time for his plane to land, it doesn't. They find out that their father has died in a plane crash, and their whole worlds crumble. Their father was their everything, their hero, their dad, their companion, and just when they think they've lost everything, they find out about each other, which they didn't know about before. So it's a story about loss and grief and love and family and new opportunities. And then you've got things like With the Fire on High, which talks about a single mother, Emoni Santiago, who wants to give everything to her daughter whilst also chasing her dreams and the moon and making her dreams come a reality. And so she embarks on a journey with her classmates to learn how to cook some really good food because that is her calling. And we explore her everyday everyday life as she goes about school, parenting, cooking, re-falling in love, and all of the things that you would expect from a coming of age story. All of her stories are so different in their own right, yet they explore Latinidad in such a beautiful way. They all explore particularly womanhood in Latinidad so well that I absolutely adore her stories. And her repertoire ranges from novels in verse all the way to novels in prose, from YA novels to adult novels, so anything in the backlog of Elizabeth Acevedo, I would definitely recommend you picking her books up, specifically through audio format. A novel that I naturally want to reread this year because the audiobook was such a great experience is Beach Read by Emily Henry. This is the only Emily Henry that I've consumed through audio, and there were absolutely no regrets. And I will argue that probably anything narrated by Julia Whelan is a great time. I read it 3 years ago, which is crazy to say, and I definitely want to reread it and annotate it. I actually want to do that to all of my Emily Henry books that I read back in the day that I did not annotate, which means Beach Read and People We Meet on Vacation deserve that right. In Beach Read, we follow 2 authors who are staying in neighboring beach houses for the next 3 months. So for the summer, we follow Gus and January. Gus, who writes literary fiction, and January, who writes swoon-worthy romance novels. However, because their genres are so very specific, while one writes about all of these whimsical depictions of falling in love and romanticizes everything, Gus writes about characters that die. Writes tragic everyday stories that compel the entirety of the country to fall in love with his books. And so as they stay in these beach houses with loads of creative blocks and writer's blocks, they don't know what their next novel is going to be. They challenge each other to write in each other's respective genres to see if that gets them out of their creative rut. However, their deal doesn't end there, because not only will they write in each other's genres, but they will make sure that they know exactly what writing in their genres entails. So while January takes him on all of these different beautiful sceneries that kind of encapsulate everything rom-com, he takes her on all of these different investigative journeys to kind of know what it takes to write something that is more akin to real life. The surprising depictions of grief in this book was something that I was not expecting when I went into it, and you better bet that the audiobook made it a much more emotional journey than it needed to be. There's something quite specific about listening to a book that is heartbreaking in audio. Honestly, I feel like it hits 10 times harder. I literally remember the most useless details of when I was listening to very specific audios. I remember I was doing my makeup when I was listening to this book and crying while I was doing my makeup, so it's a beautiful memory to hold about Beach Read. Thank you, Emily Henry and Julia Whelan. I will reread you this year, and you will break my heart all over again. So as I nestle in with a cat right behind me, Syl is apparently very joyous in joining us today, probably because she's seeing the neon lights behind me and she probably wants to eat them. However, I am going to talk about Tokyo Ueno Station next. It's kind of like a very polarizing book. I feel like a lot of people didn't like this book when it came out. However, I deeply enjoyed this. I love me a good character study. I love me a book that is really only about a single character and observing their life or death and about nothing else. And especially it being slice of life, I love that. And so I don't know exactly what that says about me and my fascination with people. I would argue it was a really good audiobook, so maybe just give it a try. It's also a really short one. It's under 4 hours. So I really do feel like in the grand scheme of audiobooks, you really have nothing to lose. And so in this one, we follow our main character Kazu, who finds his life very much tied to the imperial family. The Japanese emperor was born on the same year on the same day, and a lot of his life mirrors the emperor's and backwards. And it is a very fascinating experience in the way that the author Yumiri goes about this, because a lot of the parallels are drawn to compare the different social statuses and classes. While they experience a lot of the same things, Kazu doesn't have the same amount of resources as the emperor does. And so while the emperor is able to solve a lot of these things very quickly, obviously because of his station, Kazu is not. And not only does he find his life very difficult, and he finds that he is very invisible in real life, but when he dies, he finds himself experiencing the exact same thing. He finds himself haunting a park right next to the Tokyo Ueno Station, and our main character continues to draw parallels as the book goes along about how he is as invisible in life as he is now in death. It's such an interesting book, honestly, such a great character study, such a good one to listen to on a drive if you do commute or while you're cooking up a dinner for your family. Who knows? The options are really endless for such a short book. Yolk by Mary H.K. Choi is next. This stands as the only Mary H.K. Choi I have ever read. This is probably one of the only books I have read with such a good eating disorder representation. And it was also a very heartbreaking story about familial duties and how even though you may not have anything in common with a sibling, and even if you're feuding with your sibling, you are kind of willing, even in the reluctance, to set everything aside and make sure that you take care of them. Also, whilst maybe committing a little bit of fraud, but you know, what's another day in the life, am I right? So in this one, we follow sisters, one being Jane, who is really struggling through the daily life. She has got some really shitty friends, an eating disorder she is not really willing to own up to. She is really fumbling through fashion school, and she's overall not really having a great time in New York. And so while Jane is all struggle, her sister June is all success. She has a very successful financial job, and she is very much filthy rich. She has never really experienced any kind of struggle until she is diagnosed with cancer. And Jane will have to reluctantly put everything aside in order to take care of her sister, because that's what sisters do, right? In a time of peril, you kind of just step up to the plate and you do what you have to do. And I really, really loved the audiobook experience of this. I found myself annotating the book as I was listening to it, and I very obviously cried. I think that's a given with me, honestly. I cry with just about anything, but let me tell you, something that's going to make me cry is a really good depiction of an eating disorder. As somebody who has struggled with one herself for a long time, and then obviously seeing sisters work through all of their own issues, their conjunct issues with each other, and trying to make it out on top was both heartfelt and heartbreaking. A book that I don't talk about enough, but whose audiobook I really, really loved, and that is A Pho Love Story. I listened to this book about 3 years ago as well, and I found it so entirely charming. It is truly a love letter to Vietnamese culture, Vietnamese food. If you're looking for a book that is filled with food references and cooking and feuding families and a kind of forbidden love story, I would definitely recommend A Pho Love Story. We follow two feuding families in this one who have neighboring pho restaurants. However, their kids believe that their rivalries go far deeper than just a friendly restaurant competition. So while our male main character, Bao, feels like he is a rock, he is stable, he is steady, he feels like he is not necessarily succeeding at the things that he needs to, but he is just kind of average. He's kind of okay with being so, whilst it is not his first choice to be so. On our other side, we have got our female main character, Lynn, who feels like she is full of unbridled joy. She is full of potential. She loves the arts. She loves to paint. And if she were to choose anything to do with her life, that would kind of be it. And so as the respective children of said feuding families, they feud amongst themselves too, because what else are they expected to do? However, once they have like their first real encounter with each other, where they treat each other like proper humans and like proper kids their age, they realize that there is a lot more chemistry than meets the eye. And they kind of start wondering why exactly they waited so long to interact with each other. And it brings up the question, with their family's feud and all of the problems that date back decades, will they be able to make their love hold strong, or will it all crumble under the pressure of their respective families? I found that the twists and turns, which I didn't expect a contemporary book to have, were so well placed into the story, and I was pleasantly surprised to see that not only do we see a really well fleshed out relationship between these two teenagers, but we also really get to understand and see their families' backstories and why they treat the other the way that they do. It is not surface level at all when it comes to the explanation of why they are feuding, and I love that the author takes time to really build this story up in a way that it feels like a substantial thing that really keeps these families apart and also threatens to pull these two characters apart. And so aside from all of the beautiful mentions of food and obviously the beautiful romance that we have, I really loved the family drama. It was really, really good. And last but not least, we enter our nonfiction / classic section. Now I know that probably fitting in nonfiction and classics in the same in the same category may just be a little bit bold. However, it didn't really make sense to me to do this any other way but how it turned out. So go along with my logic here. Our very first book is going to be a nonfiction, and it's not about the burqa. I don't see enough people talking about this book. In fact, when I went on Goodreads earlier to kind of see and garner its measure of popularity, I guess, the book only has 6,000 reviews, and the audiobook has much less reviews. I think it only has 12, which was honestly astounding to me to realize. Let's double check this information. Yeah, it literally has only 12 reviews on Audible, which I think it's quite wild. But It's Not About the Burqa establishes a really, really important and wide conversation about how Muslim women are continuously ostracized from society. And I am talking not only about the the political and religious conversations that take place a lot of the time, conversations that are riddled in Islamophobia and that continue to put down women because of their religious beliefs, the way that they present themselves physically, be it the way that they dress, be it the way that they do their makeup or choose not to do their makeup, the way that they use their hijab. And so it's not about the burqa, really focuses on having all of these different conversations and really kind of pinpoint the source of the issue of why Muslim women are continuously ostracized and vilified by Western society, whilst also discussing the reality of day-to-day life for Muslim women. They are regular women just like the rest of the human population. They've got dreams and aspirations, and they still have conversations about intimacy and feminism and sex and queerness and divorces. And so the editor of the book, Mariam Khan, really looks into garnering all of these different stories and opinions and takes to create this stunning book depicting Muslim women's relationship with their faith and their hijab and everything else that comprises their day-to-day life. And I really need everybody to read this book. I cried while I was reading it. I loved every single second of it. As somebody who is half Lebanese and who grew up outside of Muslim religion and culture, I really love immersing myself as much as I can in these conversations so as to kind of further connect with that side of myself that I never really got to growing up. And shout out to Rashida, who gifted me this book and really encouraged me to read this, because without her, I probably would not have heard of this book and would probably have got into it, I would like to say, much later than I did, or even not at all. So shout out to you, Rashida, because you really changed my life with this one. I can never say enough good things about Know My Name by Chanel Miller. Definitely one of the best audiobooks I have ever listened to. Again, I know I sound like a broken record, but this truly was such an impactful, powerful read. I love books that are narrated by the authors or the editors. I think it makes for such a grander experience than if it would have been narrated by somebody else. It feels much more personal, and I think given the specific thematic of this nonfiction and exactly what happened to the author, I think it makes for a really gut-wrenching audiobook that makes you want to stop, kind of put it down for a little bit, re-pick it back up. There is not a single moment in this book where you don't want to pick up the book and annotate it because of the beautiful, stunning writing in it, how empowering it is, and the amazing quotes it has within it. And so in Know My Name, we follow the story of Chanel Miller, which for a long, long time was known as Emily Doe, who was a part of the Stanford sexual assault case. Now, for a really long time, she remained hidden in the media. They would not acknowledge her existence or her name, really, despite this being a full-blown trial that was happening at the time. And when her real identity came up as part of the trial, and as she started to experience the real throes of what it means to undergo the judicial system in the way that she was, she realized that her identity, her safety, her privacy, her everything would kind of be stripped away from her by the media and by the public eye. And she depicts every single second of it in Know My Name, as she recounts the series of events as she remembers it, as she was experiencing them, and how she feels about all of it now, as she refuses to be called a victim for what she experienced, and as she encourages everybody out there who may have experienced something similar to not back down from a process like this, which can oftentimes be extremely dehumanizing, and a lot of the times genuinely feels like judicial systems make it much more difficult for victims to come up, tell their stories, fight for their justice, because they are most always vilified, and then the aggressors are questioned in terms of, did they actually do this? Because they actually have loads of potential societally, and we don't want to take that away from them. I have often heard with these types of cases a conversation come up about how a lot of the time it seems like going through trial and undergoing all of the tedious procedures that it requires is oftentimes a lot harder than the experience itself, because of media reaction and coverage and how the public eye just adds fuel to the fire. And I think all of that is very perceivable through the book and how the people perceived it all and treated Chanel in consequence. And so I would always say, if you're looking for a very, very powerful memoir, this is the one to pick up. I have to shout out this particular section of Audible. This is not sponsored. I fucking wish, okay? A girl's got bills to pay and I am craving to work with Audible, and yet they don't want to work with me. And so they've got a whole section dedicated to classics. They are only available on Audible, but this little section really helped me with consuming some classics that I've been curious about for a really long time. 3 of my favorites that I discovered through this catalog were Pride and Prejudice, narrated by Rosamund Pike, okay? I want to have Rosamund Pike up in my ear all day, every day, which is why I also have the Wheel of Time audio, because I really want to listen to Rosamund Pike all over again, bitch. I love it. And so Pride and Prejudice, narrated by Rosamund Pike, was absolutely elite. We have got Dracula, narrated by Alan Cummings and Tim Curry, which was an absolutely phenomenal experience. So unsettling too when Dracula is like crawling up a castle. Listen, did not think I'd be freaking out at that section. However, it was every bit as good as I wanted it to be for such a spooky book. And so absolutely loved that audiobook. And then Wuthering Heights, narrated by Joanne Froggatt. I'm pretty sure I'm mispronouncing her last name, but all three of those audiobooks are so freaking phenomenal. I think I struggle a lot with classics because my brain is not wired that way. English is already my second language, and sometimes that writing is not as accessible for my brain as I'd like it to be. And so I find that for me specifically, where I struggle to read all of those overly descriptive descriptions in a lot of that 1800s writing, you know what I mean? Audiobooks are a really accessible way for me to consume classics. And so Dracula, Pride and Prejudice, and Wuthering Heights are three of the best I have listened to. So I would highly recommend, if you already have Audible, that's free, by the way. Another really, really good one to one of my favorite classics of all time, and I will shout this out by name and description, Crime and Punishment by Fyodor Dostoevsky. I loved the audiobook, but it's a very specific one. Let's look it up, because these classics have so many different renditions of audiobooks that you never really know which one to choose. A lot of the time, even the lengths are like very different, but the one that I would highly recommend is the one narrated by Anthony Held. I really went down a trip with this audiobook, let me tell you. Crime and Punishment is already such a trippy book where you genuinely feel yourself losing your sanity alongside the main character, but listening to an audiobook on top of the already crazy storyline makes it even a wilder experience. So I would definitely recommend, if you're trying to read Crime and Punishment, which Russian literature can be quite dense, I would definitely recommend this audio, because you will lose it along the way, honey. And join me, honestly, because I'm already there. And in Crime and Punishment, we follow Raskolnikov, who is a former student that, as he wanders the streets of St. Petersburg, he just ups and kills someone. He just decides out of his own two balls to off someone without any fucking remorse. He's like, okay, actually, I'm much more superior than you, so you're just gonna go. And we follow him in a game of cat and mouse with the police investigator that's really after his ass. And we really dive into the most maddening experience ever, as he genuinely believes he is above it all. And his reasoning towards doing a lot of what he does is so outlandish, and yet because he says things with such conviction, you're like, but like, why is it actually kind of making sense though? Like, it's not a good thing, but like, it's not without sense, although it's kind of actually a little bit without sense, but the audiobook makes it such a compelling experience. I would definitely recommend that one. I just absolutely loved it, and at some point in time, I definitely want to reread Crime and Punishment. I didn't think I'd ever sit here and say, I feel like it sounds very pretentious, my favorite classic is Crime and Punishment, but it is, bitch. It really And that is it for today, friends. Those are all of the audiobooks I have got to recommend to you today. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I, again, was trying something a little different with the setup, but I hope that you guys enjoyed this. If you've got any other really great audiobook recommendations, make sure to leave them in the comments. I would love to see what you guys are up to with your audiobooks, what you enjoy, what you don't enjoy. I feel like you guys would probably have like far better recs than I do, or probably a whole lot of different recs than I do, because we read so widely from different genres that I would love to see what you guys would bring to the table. So make sure to start your own threads of recommendations, and don't be shy. If you're looking for something specific, do ask in the comment section, so that again we can start our own little rec thread, and I can maybe rec you some other books that I didn't mention in this video, or if other people have got something that they can rec you, maybe we can start a little rec chain in the comment section. I think that could be quite fun. And if you reach the end of the video, I mean, let's leave a headphone emoji. I feel like that is the most fitting for an audiobook recommendations video, so let's leave a headphone emoji down in the comments if you reach the very end. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't done so already for more content like this. And if you want to support the channel further, it always helps keep it afloat and keep things getting better and better with time. I do have a Patreon. It is linked down below. For April alone, you can get a 7-day free trial before you fully pledge, so that you get to see everything Patreon has to offer and everything that goes down over there that you're not going to see anywhere else. That is always linked at the top of the description in case you want to join us, in case you want to be a part of the Citadel. And yeah, I love you guys so much, and I will see you on the next one. Bye, everybody.